Yeah, all of his.
Alrighty, good morning, everyone. It's still morning, right? Welcome to Saratoga Springs Public Library and to the first, what we hope will be annual Saratoga Book Festival. My name is Artful. I'm on the board of the book festival, and my day job happens to be director of the Saratoga Springs Public Library. In case you're wondering, is the best job in the world? In addition to our corporate sponsors, which we have listed here, we hope that you will patronize them because they really have been super supportive of this festival and our efforts here. We would love to thank also the good folks of the Friends of Saratoga Springs Public Library, without whom many things that we do are not possible. So we're extremely grateful to them. For those who have not had a chance yet to visit Northshire Books store up on Broadway, just about a block away, please be aware that they have in stock copies of books by our authors, as well as they are helping us with a pop-up bookstore that we've got right here in the back of our new and popular area. So authors who are presenting throughout the day are represented there for sale. We also have book plates. If you weren't able to get a book ahead of this session, they'll be signing. Or if Northshire has sold out of their books. So if the stock is gone, we may have authors who might be willing to sign a book plate for when you can get it later. Mark your calendars now. We're billing this, even though it grates on my ears because it's ungrammatical to say the first annual anything. But we're hoping that this will be the first annual Saratoga Book Festival. And we're so optimistic about that we have a date for the second annual. And so if you want to mark your calendars now, 10/22/22. That's a good, easy date to remember. So we hope to see you back in this space again next year with a friend, and maybe you can sit a little more closely together. With that business out of the way, please help me welcome and thank our authors whose time and generosity during these really crazy, uncertain times contribute to making this festival a great success. With us here today are two celebrated writers who will share insights about their latest novels and writing projects. With us we have Jonathan Santlofer, who is the author of The Last Mona Lisa and 6 other novels, including The Death Artist, Colorblind, The Killing Art, The Murder Notebook, and Anatomy of Fear, which won the Nero Wolf Award for Best Crime Novel of 2009. His acclaimed memoir, The Widower's Notebook, was at the top of many Best of 2018 book lists and was a featured segment on Fresh Air with Terry Gross. He is the editor and creator of several anthologies, including a New York Times notable book, It Occurs to Me That I Am America, and the New York Times bestselling serial novel, Inherit the Dead. Also an artist, Santlofer's work is in many public and private collections, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Art Institute of Chicago, and Tokyo's Institute of Contemporary Art. He serves on the board of Yado, one of the oldest arts communities in the U.S., and created the Center for Fiction's Crime Fiction Academy. He lives in New York, where he is currently at work on a sequel to The Last Mona Lisa. Tom Piazza is celebrated as a novelist and a writer on American music. His 12 books include the novels of Free State and City of Refuge, the post-Katrina manifesto, Why New Orleans Matters, and the essay collection, Devil Sent the Rain. He was the principal writer for the innovative HBO drama series TREME, and the winner of a Grammy Award for his album notes to Martin Scorsese Presents the Blues, A Musical Journey. His writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Atlantic, Book Forum, the Oxford American, Columbia Journalism Review, and any other periodical you've ever read. He lives in New Orleans, and we are super pleased to welcome both of you to Saratoga Springs.
Are these on? Yeah. Yes.
Can they do it here?
Yeah. Thank you for coming. And I just want to say I'm in one of my favorite places, Saratoga Springs, where I met Tom at Yado, many years ago. And it's just always great to be back. I have to say, right before I came here, I was a little early. And went and got something, Mrs. London stuffed it in my face really fast. And then ran over here. Just a little sustenance, to keep it going. Anyhow, it's great to be part of the inaugural Saratoga Book Festival, and I'm sure it's true that it will continue. How can it not in this great, arts town? So when I listen to Tom's, all of the things Tom has done, I think really and truly, even though it's billed as my book time, I think really Tom's the cooler cat here, which we'll be talking to him as well.
Are there any questions? Anyway, well, thank you for introducing me again, and Jonathan said just about everything that I would want to say about the happiness of being here. I'm in residence now at Yaddo, which I'm very grateful for, and it's a magical place. I'm sure many of you know about it, but we're here not to talk about me, but to talk about Jonathan's really fine and amazing new novel, The Last Mona Lisa. And there's many things to talk about. Jonathan and I have discussed it at great length, but it pulls off something very difficult and very, very satisfying, which is to say that it is both once it gets up to speed on about page 3, it becomes something of a white knuckle crime thriller and sort of a search for a thing that a number of different characters have a lot of interest in finding. And so there's depth of character. There's also extraordinary sensitivity to the beauties of art, the beauties of Florence, the beauties of Paris. It's just a remarkable book. So I want to start by letting Jonathan tell you the sort of setup of the book. It's based on a historical event from 1911, which was actually the theft of the painting, wasn't it?
Yeah, the book is based on a true crime, and I'm sure many of you know, you might not know all the details, but that the Mona Lisa was stolen from the Louvre Museum in 1911. I just also have to ask Tom for 1 second what was wrong with the first 2 pages, but I thought they were pretty good, but okay. What happened for me is that I kind of became obsessed with that theft, and I started doing research, and I will admit that I started doing that research 11 years ago. It didn't take me 11 years to write the book. I put it aside, I bring it back. So the crime itself is one of those astonishing kind of things. So a disgruntled Louvre employee, he'd been fired, a carpenter, Vincenzo Peruzza. Now, there are slight variations to this story over time, but I'll give you the most accepted. Hidden in a broom closet overnight, emerged in the morning on a day the museum was closed to the public, which he knew, went into the Salon Carré where the Mona Lisa hung between a Correggio and a Titian, and he took the painting off the wall, and he knew exactly how to do it because he had installed it. He had made the box and the glass for it. Took it off the wall, went into a hallway, nobody was there, took the glass and frame, left them in the hallway, walked out, put the painting, the panel under his workman's tunic, his Louvre workman's, and he walked out. The best part to me is that it took the Louvre 2 days to notice the Mona Lisa was missing. This is a true fact, There was a painter, how you see in museums, painters come in and they get permission and they set up easels and they do copies. So this painter was making a copy of the Mona Lisa, and he came in and he set up and he was like, so where's the painting? Nobody knew. They were all like, well, maybe it's being cleaned. The Mona Lisa's never cleaned, so that couldn't be. So anyway, when they discovered that, of course everyone flipped out, and like 60 police came to the Louvre, they searched it, they searched the surrounding area. What they didn't know, they also closed all of the railroads and all the exits out of France. What they didn't know is that Peruzza had it in his apartment just a few blocks from the museum. And he had it for 2 years. It was missing for 2 years. I should also add, which is something that I kind of love, more people, more Parisians lined up to see the blank space on the wall than anyone had ever come to see the Mona Lisa. So The Mona Lisa was an important painting which we can talk about being a Leonardo, but it became a real cause célèbre after the theft. The theft is what made it super famous for many, many reasons. So that stuff got me started, but I did not want to write a like factual historical novel. I wanted to mix fact and fiction and create, I don't know, I didn't know, you know, at the beginning you never know what you're doing, but I had some ideas. And I also wanted it to be a contemporary story. So I created, I'll just very quickly, I created the great-grandson of the thief of Perugia. The family has changed their name to Perone, and Luke Perone, who has been obsessed with his great-grandfather his whole life, comes to Florence because he's heard, they've discovered or found his great-grandfather's prison diary. And so he comes to Florence to find this, this diary. What he doesn't know is that he is not alone in doing this. There are many other people who don't want the information in this diary to come out. So anyhow, that's sort of the setup. There's, I'll let Tom ask me more questions because it'll be easier that way. No.
Can you repeat that? No, it's an extraordinary setup for a book, and one of the things that someone who writes novels also is that you don't just write out of one voice or one point of view in the book. The central character in this book is the great-grandson of the Vincenzo Perugia who stole the painting initially, and he's looking for his great-grandfather's diary, and as you say, others are too, but the book manages to go in and out of a number of different points of view, first person and third person, and yet the momentum of the book, I was going to say it never flags, but it's just the opposite, it just keeps accelerating. So now why did you make the choice to do that?
Well, thank you. You know, I think I started my life as a painter. Now that, I didn't start my life as a painter, I mean, you know, I was a kid. But I did seriously study painting, and I think every painting I always thought about, you know, had its own kind of propulsion or its own sort of story. And I think every novel creates its own structure. You don't know it going in. Like, I honestly can't say that I knew it was going to be multiple points of view. I did know it was going to be a story that bounced between the past and the present. I knew that, and I liked that idea. I also, you know, I don't really believe in the rules. I was like that as a painter, much to the annoyance of my art school teachers. And when I started writing, I was more rule conscious, and then you know, you're told often not to change points of view, and well, why not? You know, for me, if the reader just slides with it and goes with it, well, great, you know. So, yes, there are 5 different points of view. It goes from the past to the present, but I'll tell you the thing I worked hardest on in this book was to not make it seem difficult, you know? Like, I may have told you this story, Tom, and Tom and I did a Zoom event, so to see him up close in person is like, wow. It's been mitigated by, you know, my computer screen. You look much better, almost alive.
Almost alive.
Well, you know, we're working on it, all of us, right? So there's all these points of view, and so what I did work hard on, as I said, was I wanted it to feel easy. And the story I was going to say is that when I got out of graduate painting school, much to my parents' chagrin that I even went, but so my mother said, okay, you know everything about art now, right? Take me to galleries. So I took my mother to Soho galleries. Soho was just burgeoning at the time. And we went into a Robert Ryman show of white paintings. Now, you can, right. So my mother, you know, after saying many other things, she said, just these look so easy. And I thought about that for a few seconds, and I said, you know, Mom, when you go to the ballet, do you want to see the ballerinas sweat? Not really. Like, so that's something I keep in my mind. Like, I don't want any reader to be reading my book and thinking, man, he worked so hard, you know? No, because the minute I'm in the book is, you're out of the book. It's not, you know, book has to live on its own. So, yeah, so different points of view. It happened. It happened. I knew there'd be the voice of Luke, because he's my protagonist. You know, I did something else that happened sort of at a certain point in the book, which is, so you go into I created the diary, the prison diary. I had to write all those entries, and that took a while. It was fun.
Jonathan, if I could say, the way Jonathan handles that in the book is at exactly the point that you as the reader needs to have some sense of the background, the sort of the background that's casting all the light and shadows on everything that's happening in the present. He goes into italicized passages that are excerpts from that diary. And I really, by the way, parenthetically, I kind of marveled at the way you created this diction that was not the super contemporary sound, but was very, very readable also. That was kind of wonderful. So I just wanted to say that's how you go back and forth.
Well, I like that you said something about the diction, because that was difficult. Like, I had to find a voice for the diary. Now, Vincenzo, who becomes Vincent in the book, he's a smart guy, he's a reader, but he's totally uneducated, and he's a man out of his element. You know, he's an Italian living in Paris. But so it took me a while to find that voice for the book. And if anybody ever reads this here, that you'll notice that the only punctuation in the prison diary are periods. There are no commas. Everything is a simple sentence. At first, I had it all statements with dashes, and my editor almost had a nervous breakdown. I liked that, but I get it. And the other thing that Tom is bringing up is, so you have the prison diary, and then I thought, but I really want to give these scenes, you know? I want to have Vincent in the past in Paris and what really happened. So you go from the prison diary literally into passages in the past. And those were so much fun for me to write, very romantic in a way. And you know, it was interesting for me. You know, when you say, you know, when you need more information about the past, I realized something a while ago, which is when we learn something in the present, it totally changes what we think about something in the past, right? You know, you discover something and suddenly this thing you've believed in is modified, is changed, is different. And so I kept thinking these two stories have to inform each other. And I wanted that thing, you know, where you're reading two stories and you're totally into this story, and then it ends and you go, no, I don't want to go to the next story. And then you're in the next story and you leave. And I hope that, you know, that's what I hoped, so.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing also, I think we should maybe talk a little bit, as much as you're comfortable talking, about the plot of the book without going up to a point at which there are spoilers, obviously, but there are other people who are vivid characters, who are very active agents in the plot. And one of these plot threads is it fair to call it a love story?
Yeah.
So, and I was curious, the woman in question, variously Alexandra,
Right.
Was she in your initial conception of the book, or did she just sort of arrive on the scene the way she does in the narrative?
She arrived on the scene. You know, it's not that I didn't think I wanted a major woman character. I knew I did. I just didn't know who she'd be. And as soon as she arrived in the book for me, which is quite early, you know this. So, you know, when you're writing, you're so inside your head, and for me, because I'm visual and I'm a movie kind of person, I like to walk through the scene. And so as doesn't really ruin anything for me to tell you that Luke falls in, quite infatuated with Alexandra. I fell in love with Alexandra. The weird thing is that those people are walking around my house. Do you know what I mean? Like, they're in my head. I believe they exist. I can imagine what they wear, what they do. Love story. Never wrote a love story in my life. My daughter once described me as the least sentimental man in the world, which is not true. You know what your children say about you. There are two love stories in this book, because there's one in the present and one in the past. And my thought about that, if you read this book, is that they reflect each other, that they're the same kind of people. So there's Vincent and Simone in Paris in the 1900s, and then there's Alex and Luke in the present. And I see them very much as the same people. So I became a kind of romantic in my old age.
Well, it's interesting because there's a lot of, what's the word I want to use? Shifting sense of who people are. People are operating under aliases. People are showing up and presenting themselves as something that they're not. There's all these sliding doors, and it adds terrifically to your curiosity about who these people are. And one of the things, the book is so much about seeing and being seen. And I think both those, certainly just to dwell for another moment on those two characters involved in that developing relationship, whatever it turns into, are both very concerned with being seen and what they're seeing. And can you talk about that a little bit? It's a very visual book, and I actually wanted to read a couple of very short excerpts aloud, if I might. But talk about that a little bit.
That's interesting, and it definitely strikes a real chord with me, because when you're, to the writers in the audience, when you're writing a novel, and you know this, Tom, from writing several novels, that for me, I don't know the book till I have a full draft. I don't quite understand the book. But then you figure out, oh, there's an underlying sort of theme here. I remember in this book I wrote Anatomy of Fear, which is a title that's it was not the title. But I realized after I finished a draft that it was a book about fathers and sons. And so I went back and I wrote a one-page prologue about something that had happened to this character's father, so that then it would be imbued in the whole book. In the last Mona Lisa, I kind of knew it earlier. I knew that Vincent, was a man without a country, a man without an identity. He was desperate to be seen. He's an outsider, and he's kind of a slightly miserable creature, but he's adored by this wonderful woman, which gives him this other dimension. I always say that women civilize men anyway, but yes, and Luke in the present is kind of a, he's a sort of screwed up guy. He's had a troubled background. He was part of a gang. He, was a mess. He was a drinker, but he's also an artist. He found himself through art. And I didn't write the book thinking, my main character's going to have this huge arc and he's going to become perfect. No, I didn't think that at all. And I sort of followed his whatever journey you might say. But I did want both of these characters to find something about themselves in the course of this. So, and I think they do. I think it's true for the other characters. I think it's true for my Interpol agent, who I kind of love, John Washington Smith, but Tom also said something that's really true. Everybody in the book is concealing something. Everybody's lying. Everybody's misrepresenting themselves. And I kind of love that.
And may I say, it works really well with the theme of the book too, because at a certain point we learned that not only has the original Mona Lisa been stolen from its place, but there are now copies of the Mona Lisa out there floating around. And so that genie has gotten out of the bottle. So that also is a matter of false identity, you know, of an alias, you know, alias whatever. But so, and there was one point I think we talked about once before. It's a very visual book too, which should surprise nobody because Jonathan is actually a really amazing painter and draftsman in his own right. But there was one moment, I think you brought this up, or maybe I brought it up, I don't remember anymore, our conversations interweave so much, but there was one moment where Luke is going up to a certain apartment house, and there's a chip of paint off the, is it the doorway, the frame of the door, and notices that there are layers of other colored paint going down. So that, and it's such a deft novelistic or just writerly thing to have, writerly move to have made there, because it tells you something about the oldness of that building, of the whole city. And it also redounds to the whole thematic thing about how everybody in this book has these different layers of identity that keep getting peeled off. But I want to do one thing, if I might. I'd like to, I want to just, I'm saying how visual it is, but I would like to just read you two passages. Because to me, the most surprising and kind of almost astonishing thing about the book is that Jonathan manages to write a real page turner, horrible term, but and at the same time write extraordinarily lyrically about setting and art. Not a great, he always leaves you wanting more, but I'd like to read you two very brief passages, if that's okay. Here's one little passage of him just walking through, of the main character, Luke, walking through Florence. He puts an address into Google Maps and followed the route, holding my phone out in front of me like a divining rod. It led me past the Bargello Museum, which I had been meaning to visit to see Donatello's young David, a sculpture that many art historians believed it kicked off the Renaissance. One more artwork I had taught and never seen. The crenellated building dominated a small square and blanketed the surrounding streets in shadow. If I was reading my GPS correctly, I was heading southeast, away from the historic part of the city, into a less populated neighborhood, along one angled or curving street to another, buildings shifting from warm grays to tans to sienna and even rose. I could feel the presence of generations, the weight of it in the stone walls and peeling paint, could smell it in the air, almost taste it, not just the city's age, but its history. He brings off so much in that one paragraph. I just thought it was, and the book is full of passages like that somehow managed to not impede the narrative.
Oh, that's nice.
Did you have to edit out a lot? Were you tempted to go on? Because you obviously luxuriate in...
Oh my God, there's 6 other, books over there that I can pull out, You do a lot of research, as you know, for a book, and you can't use it because then your book turns into a travelogue or it turns into something descriptive, and the reader's just like, no, you can't. So you have to be very selective. I did a lot of research. I walked all of those streets. I mean, somebody said, so was your research like really difficult? And I said, oh yeah, going to Florence, Paris,
Hell, just hell. Yeah.
just terrible. But, I knew Florence, I know Paris better, but I knew Florence, but I didn't really know it. And I went there, I Airbnb'd an apartment in the Piazza di Madonna, which is exactly where Luke stays in the book. And I stayed there for 2 weeks. And I had already written a draft of the book, so I followed every character's route, everyone. And then, yeah, I had tons of research, but I had to figure out what would work and what would give the reader the sense of being there enough, just enough. Because you're traveling with the character and you want to feel it, you want to be there but you don't want to be distracted by it. You know, it just has to, everything. I was just having this conversation with a young writer, a friend of mine, who asked me to read her book, which is quite good, but I said to her, you know, everything for me in a book has to mean something. It has to be part of it. It has to be organic. In a thriller, and I think this is a thriller, has to lead you forward. You know, everything is moving you. It's like a train. Although can I diverge for 1 second? Because so I was at this thing recently, an in-person dinner, and I mentioned that I was a judge for this Mystery Writers of America and Saratoga, and I hope nobody's here. And this person said, oh, well, you know, genre books. You know, crime fiction, I didn't go on a rant because I was a good guest, but we're talking crime books, Crime and Punishment, An American Tragedy, Lolita. I mean, really, do I have to say more? Yes, there's lots of crummy genre books, lots of crummy literary books too. So I had my moment, okay, we'll move on. I just defend the genre. It's not the only thing I write, but I think writing a good crime novel is so difficult, and I respect the people in that world who are really amazing people. It's also a very generous world, I have to say.
How so? What do you mean?
Well, I came out of the art world, you know, which is very arch, lots of black clothes, very cool. You know, it's a world based on artifice, so you better look good. I always wanted to be so much taller in the art world. I don't care in the literary world. But, you know, so, I don't know, I wrote a novel like 20-something years ago called The Death Artist, and it got some attention, and then it went on to do well. But that community of crime fiction writers absolutely embraced me. I couldn't believe it. I went to this conference, people sought me out, they were so nice to me. You know, I didn't get the feeling like I often got in the art world that they wanted to kill me. That if you did well, it meant they couldn't do well, which I never understood. But, so yeah, I mean...
Was that partly, though, because that was your first crime book? I mean, has that feeling about the crime world stayed with you? I mean...
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you know, if you see the blurbs on the back of my book, I'm not friends with Michael Connelly. I'm not friends with Sarah Friesicky or, you know, Laura Lippman. I know them from the crime world, and I blindly sent them my book, very nervously, I should say, and they all gave me beautiful blurbs. Now, they all said they wouldn't if they didn't like it, but that's difficult, you know, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about other places.
Well, no, I'm just curious about it, because a lot of times, you know, when you step through that door from, you know, something being just, you know, kind of an avocation to something that you're actually doing,
yeah.
It does change things. I mean, I know that from just looking at the music world, you know, I mean, not that I've ever stepped through that door, but I can see the difference.
Tom's an amazing music writer, and on Dylan, there's that piece on Fats Domino of yours that I love. There's so much, you should really look. Tom also is a very fluid writer and a musician himself, but you know, I'm one of those people who loves music, but if I had to do anything in music, no. But Tom really can bring you there in a way that, you know, he said I can do visually in my novels, that he can do musically when he writes about music, which I find amazing. So I recommend that you look for that, aside from other novels.
Well, thank you. That's nice, Jonathan. But like, what I was trying to get was that I'm accepted into, like when I play music, I've been very fortunate in my life to be able to make music with all kinds of really wonderful musicians who are far above me in terms of skill and, you know, dedication to that as a vocation. But I think if I were to, I'd be evaluated in a different way, I think, if I decided to say, hey, you know, I'm going to, you know, do this or that. So it was, I think it was I've been fascinated. I may as well ask you about this now. So, you were a painter, a visual artist, before you were a writer. You said you used to be a painter who wrote, and now you're a writer who sometimes paints. But so, what made you start writing with this other talent that you had developed to a high level? So, what was that?
I'll tell you. You want the really quick, brief history? I'm not going to start in grade school, but I was, well, a little bit like Luke, except Luke is like 36, tall and handsome. But okay, I was a terrible student, didn't discover I was dyslexic until I went to art school, but the only thing I could do well was I could draw. And so I decided in my head, I'm going to be an artist. You know, I didn't know what that meant. I grew up in a middle-class family. I went to art school. I found myself. I was so happy, really, really, really happy. And then I went to graduate school in painting, and I was even happier. And I came out, and I was extraordinarily lucky. I'm having a memory that I'll share with you, which is I went with one of my teachers from graduate school to a party in Soho. And this is a long time ago, and I was very nervous. I was probably the youngest person there, and it was like filled with the current luminaries, you know, Chuck Close and Elizabeth Murray and Jennifer Bartlett and this person. So I sat on the couch and I didn't speak to anyone. I was very nervous. But the woman who sat next to me on the couch, we talked the whole night. And at the end of the night, this is a real diversion, but and I told her what I did. She said, well, where can I see your work? And I said, why? And she said, well, I'm the curator of painting and sculpture at the Whitney. Now, had I known who she was, I wouldn't have been able to say a word. But she came to my studio 6 months later, put me in a Whitney show, and I had this amazing career. I was the luckiest person in the world. And then, this is about, well, it's a long time ago, about 30 years ago, I was having a retrospective show that I didn't want. I thought I was too young, it was ridiculous, but I did it. And they gathered the best paintings of mine over 10 years from museums and collectors, and my newest paintings in my gallery, in my studio, like 6 paintings wet, they built boxes around. That show went to a museum in Chicago. It opened on a Friday and the building burned down the next day. So, yeah, that was fun. But you know, I'll say this. At the time, I was devastated. Looking back at that, I can say many things. One, it gave me a second career that I never would have had because I was successful in the art world. And of course, if you're successful at something, you're just going to keep going, right? But I couldn't paint, and then at the same time, life is very weird and sometimes perverse.
Jonathan Santlofer, what do you mean you couldn't paint? What do you mean?
Well, I mean, I had trouble painting after that for a while. But I was invited to the American Academy in Rome as a painter. So I packed up my family, my wife, my 8-year-old daughter, and we moved to Rome. Another hardship, I have to say. But it was unbelievable. It was one of the best years of my life, but I couldn't really paint. I would go to galleries and museums and churches, and I would make copies of things, which I had never done, which, by the way, started my new career as an art forger. But, which is true, by the way, I'm a legal art forger. I've been doing that for 25 years. Yeah. But the other thing is I started a novel because I was very unsatisfied. And when I came back to New York after a year, I looked at this novel. It was a very serious literary novel. And it was about this guy, and he was a painter, and he was like 40, and he'd lost all his work, and he was really unhappy and depressed. And I read it at home, and I just thought, I hate this guy. I hate him. What a privilege, whiny. And so I killed the character on the page. And I recommend that. If you're having a bad day, kill yourself in language. And I realized, I threw away the entire book after that. And I wrote The Death Artist, what became The Death Artist, which was about a serial killer in the art world in New York. And I killed everyone, critics, artists, everyone. I remember I worked in this building with all artists, and I remember this young woman down the hall saying, because of your book, some crazy person's going to come in to kill you, but you won't be here, and they're going to kill me. I said, I don't think so. But anyhow, that changed my life, because that book was a big success, and I was really surprised. And then they gave me a contract for 2 more, and that was like, what? So I continued. But now I draw every day. But I'm not a serious artist. I was then, I'm not now. If you go on Instagram or Facebook or any of those, you'll see that I put drawings every day, not every day, but often, of people I love, or when somebody, like when Charlie Watts died, I did a watercolor, or tomorrow's Rita Hayworth's birthday, and I intend to do a drawing for Rita. And then I write something about my feeling about that person. I did one a couple of months ago on Cass Elliott's birthday, because I had spent the night with Cass Elliott a long time ago. Not quite a radio thing. In any case, so that's what I do. I draw every day. It makes me happy. Writing's really hard, and it's very unsexy, sitting at your laptop, Painting and drawing, you get up, you move around, you listen to music, puts you in a good mood. You write, your back hurts, and but it's also you live in your head, which is fantastic. I know, I'm sorry, long-winded.
No, not at all.
I haven't been out much.
I want you to talk a little bit, if you would, about, you sort of said in passing that you're a professional art forger now. You need to, if you would, just sort of tell people what you mean by that.
Okay, well, in the book, Tom mentioned before about the Mona Lisa. So that in the book, there is a character named Yves Chaudron, who is believed to be a real character, who was an art forger in Paris. Yves Chaudron and the fake Marquis d'Alfiero were 2 characters who've been written about, very dubious characters, and supposedly they kind of created this theft, and they used Perugia, and then they stole the painting to make forgeries. And there were known to be 6 forgeries made of the Mona Lisa. Several of them are in other museums that have turned up. There is speculation that the Mona Lisa in the Louvre is a forgery, some people believe that. I got permission to go to the Louvre without telling them what I was going to write, and I'm sure if they've read it, they have a contract out on me. But, so for me, what happened was this, weirdly. I started making copies. They were for myself. I wanted something tangible, after losing my work. And then people started asking me to do paintings for them. Like, this man came to me, a very wealthy financial guy, and he had been bidding at Sotheby's or Christie's for this 1950s Franz Klein painting. And he told me he dropped out at 14 million, it went for 24 million, and could I replicate it? And I thought in my head, yeah, for 14 million. Well, believe me, I don't get anything like that. Nothing, no millions. Anyway, I said, yeah, I'll do it. But there are rules about what you can do. And this was going into the atrium of his company, so it was semi-public. So I painted the painting the exact same size, black and white, every drip, every single thing, but I painted it in mirror image. And he said, people come in and say, oh, so you got that painting. Good. And so I continue to do this. I just finished a 5 by 15 foot wide Frederick Friesicky painting, which was an American impressionist, not known at all anymore. And it was a painting that had been in the Shelburne Museum in Atlantic City, and this collector wanted me to replicate it. And I did, and that almost killed me. But, so I know what it's like to slip inside the mind of a forger, and to become this other person, this other artist, and how it feels good and how it also feels bad. So when I created that character in the book, I just got that guy, like the romance of it and the sadness that you're not making your own work, you're making something else, even though with your hand, you can do anything. I don't know. It's, I like doing it, actually. I like doing it. You know, I remember when my daughter was about 12, which is too old, she said, you know, Daddy, you should just sell these as the original. And I said, honey, I'm wasting my money on your education. So.
Well, you know, your remarks about how enjoyable it can be to understand yourself into a character who is not you know. I mean, that must have been part of the allure of writing fiction for you, I guess, when you started doing it. I mean, that's a traumatic event in your life to lose all. I mean, it may end up having, you know, beneficial effects or whatever down the line. You may have gotten something out of it, may have put you on a course that, for all you know, there's no way of really knowing where your life would have gone had that not happened. But anyway, I just wonder, had you ever thought about writing before that?
Well, I did write. I wrote nonfiction. I was the editor at large for culture for Art News. So I went to Lascaux and wrote about it. I write about various collectors. So I did write, but it was very different.
Different thing from actually creating a character.
You know this from creating characters. I mean, it's tremendous fun to create characters and situations. I remember...
Except when it's not fun. Except when they resist you. Yeah. But go ahead.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. When it's going well and you're moving with the characters and the stories, it's so fun. But, you know, I always think about when I went to graduate school, and I was a year behind everyone in age, so I was a little bit young. When I got to graduate school, I was 20, and there was the head of the art department was this man, George McNeil, who had founded the American Abstract Artists in 1936, and he was my painting teacher. I thought he was really, really old. He was 60. But I turned him into my father. He didn't know that, but I just loved him so much. But he would say things to us. I remember he would say, like I'd say, I'll never do that. And he'd say, you don't know what you're never going to do. You have no idea. You're a kid. The other thing, though, he always said, and I've taken this to heart best I can, he'd say, you know, put all your angst and your depression and your craziness into your work and keep your life simple. So my life's really boring. You know, I don't do anything. And so I you know, and I'm fairly nuts. So I put all of that into the work, and it makes, you know, I wanted this book to be really fun and thrilling and dangerous and all the things, you know, somebody asked me, well, are you Luke? Oh, no, of course not.
Of course not. What would be the point of that?
Well, the point would be that he's a pretty cool guy. He's a mess, but he's a cool guy. But, you know, no, I wouldn't bolt out of my life to look for my great-grandfather's diary. You know. But I have to just quickly say, this book, if it's based on anything, it's based on 2 literary books, not crime books. One is which is a book I've read a few times, and it's about a fictional poet, which I love, and then The French Lieutenant's Woman by John Fowles, which is one of my favorite books, which is a faux Victorian novel. And I was trying to write, you know, this fictional historical novel that blurred the facts.
You know, I want to make sure that we have a little time. I see we've blown through this time pretty fast, haven't we? If anybody has a question they'd like to ask, yeah.
Jonathan, I have a practical question for a writer. So you fell in love with this story, and then did you look into Perugia, I believe that's the original in 1911, to find out if he had a great-grandson, and who then his attorney may visit you and say, my client is presently experiencing pain and suffering. And if you had found, oh my God, he does, where do you go from there? Because you'd already fell in love with this story.
Well, that's a great question. I found out a lot of things about him, very little of which I used, because it didn't serve my story. I don't think they'd sue me. He's a pretty romantic, wonderful character, I think, and I don't think he really was. But yeah, I made choices about how I would represent him. I mean, if his family comes after me, I don't know. I don't think they can, because at the beginning we have one of those denials, you know. But yeah, so there's no great grandson that I discovered.
Anybody else have a question for John? Oh, yes, okay.
Just curious, since you're an art forger, how would you feel about someone doing that to your artwork, forging it?
Well, they probably wouldn't do it because my work's not important enough. But I only forge dead artist paintings, and I don't, they're replications, and I don't claim they're mine. I make with contemporary materials, so I tell clients, you can say whatever you want about this painting, but if you try and pass it off as the real thing, forget it, because you're going to be discovered in 1 second. So, you know, I write on the back my name and what I've done. I don't really think of them as forgeries. You know, I don't think of, you know, the people who try and put forgeries in museums or sell them to people in that way. I work for individuals. So if somebody forged one of my paintings, I'd love to see it. You know?
Interesting.
Yes, yes, right there.
I wonder what type of art is on your walls in your home?
To repeat the question just for the, I guess this is being done, what kind of art is on your walls at home?
I have to tell you that for this book, I've done probably 50 virtual events, and I don't do them in my studio. I live in a big old loft in the Flower Market in Manhattan. So it's like over 2,000 square feet. The back half's my studio, and that's filled with work I'm working on and imagery and drawings. So the front half, my living space, has nothing on the walls. Nothing. Not one single thing. People think it's really weird. They come into my house, people say, did you just move in?
Well, you know, that's kind of hilarious because in my house in New Orleans, it's full of books. Every
I have books.
It's full of books, but in the room where I write, nothing. It's like a Japanese garden or something. You know, if there's a rock in the wrong place, it upsets me. And there are no books. There's nothing on the wall. Nothing. It has to be a complete clean slate or something.
You know, I went to this arts colony a few years ago, which will go unnamed, and they put me in a studio that had art on the walls. And I was like, are they insane? You know, I made them come take it down. I said, it's not that I hate it or anything. It's like, I'm working in here. I can't have other work in here. So yeah, I mean, it's book. I mean, you know, I have books. I read, but I don't have art in my living space simply because I live with it in another way. I love art, you know, and in fact, when I went to the Cézanne show, which just ended at the Museum of Modern Art, and I realized I'd been writing this kind of stuff for too long because they have these lot of little pieces, and I thought, like, I could get that under my jacket, you know. But I also know they're bolted to the wall, and I know they're cameras because my first job out of graduate school, I worked at the Whitney. So I sort of know that I'd get caught. But, you know, my mind does think that. And believe me, if someone gave me a Cézanne, I'd hang it.
Anybody else have a question? Yes, back there.
I myself, I dabble a little bit in writing, but sometimes I get really bad at like writer's block. Do you have any ways to overcome that? Or...
Ways to overcome writer's block. Ways to overcome writer's block. Well, I'll approach that from a side door, okay? Which is almost always, I can't pontificate about in general terms, but for me, when I'm writing, almost always there's a point where I'm just kind of, there's something that won't give. There's a door that won't open, there's a knot that I can't untie, whatever, you know, pick your metaphor. So And almost invariably, it turns out that the thing that is the problem, if you want to call it a block, I don't know, whatever, writer's block can be for other things. You know, you have rejection, parentize, whatever it might be. You know, there are those factors. But if you're just having a problem with a specific story or a novel or whatever it might be, I'm assuming you could hear me, I hope you can. The thing that is the difficulty, the thing that appears to be the block or the, you know, untieable knot is actually what the thing's about. That's an important thing to remember. And if it's not true for you, it's not true for you. But I always find that the thing that is putting up the most resistance, there's a reason it's putting up resistance. There's a reason that there are a lot of guards around Fort Knox, too. You know, I mean, generally the thing that is the most valuable is the thing that's most heavily guarded. So, you know, if you're coming up against the wall, maybe there's something back there, and you know, you might need to try to go around back. You might need to drill down and dig a hole under the wall. I don't know. There's all kinds of ways you can image this for yourself, you know. But that would be my best thing to say about writer's block, you know. Basically, maybe it just comes down to you know, you could put it this way, just coming at something from a very different angle. Tell it in a different voice. Let me say one more thing about that. When I was writing my most recent novel, this book, A Free State, I was absolutely dead set on writing it in third person. I was like, if I write this book in first person, it's set in the 1850s, but if I write this book in the first person, I won't be able to go all the different places I need to go in the narrative. And I did this for about 6 months, and my much better half, Mary, kept saying to me, why don't you try the first person, maybe it'll shake things. And I was like, I can't do the first person, because if I do the first person, I can't go over here, and then I can't, you know, blah, blah, blah. She's all right, okay. You know, and another 2 months would go by. Finally, it just absolutely, total desperation. We were at the beach, and I was like, okay, screw it. I'm going to try it in first. And all of a sudden, it's like all the tumblers in the lock went down, and I was able to proceed. And I wrote other parts of the book in third person. But sometimes you just need to hit that rock at just the right place, and it cleaves into what you need it to be.
I think that's great. I had many things to say about that. One would be to try writing something differently. You know, just take a chapter, take a passage, and as Tom says, so you've been writing in the third person, put it in the first person, put it in the weird second person, try something different. The other thing I find is to not do it in writing. So there's a really good book by the literary writer Madison Smart Bell, in which he talks about coming at a writing problem from another direction. So one of his students is the very successful crime writer, Laura Lippman, whose book, by the way, I just read. What's it called? It's really fun. But in any case, she makes charts, like colored paper charts, like these scrolls on her wall, like all the red dots are the main character, and then a square is this. And
Well, I want to say something about that. Laura Lippman is married to David Simon,
that's correct.
who was the auteur behind The Wire on one of the great drama shows on HBO. And I worked on a show with David Simon,
Right.
TREME, which is set in New Orleans, and that's the way people do in the writer's room. You have a wall, and you put up different colored index cards, and each one corresponds to a different character. It's a great way of getting into it and seeing it visually instead of just, you know, linearly, consecutively in your mind. Yeah.
Well, I learned that from a screenwriter. I put every scene on an index card. I don't make them different colors because I'm a freak. What I do is I draw a little triangle of color in the corner. So Luke is blue and Alex is red and such and such and such and such. And I cover a table or the floor with them to see, first of all, if I see suddenly, oh, I have 6, you know, chapters in a row that are taking place in the same place, I go, that's no good. You know, it's like a jigsaw puzzle, move it around. The other thing is, get out of your chair, take a walk around the block, take a run, go to the gym. You know, Mike Nichols, by the way, great biography by Mark Harris that I just read, said you get your best ideas away from your work. So suddenly you're there, you can't think of anything, and you want to rip it up, you want to stop working, and you go take a walk, and you think, oh, great. Now Tom knows, because I spoke to him yesterday on this sequel that I'm writing that I was yesterday going to call my agent and say, you have to give them the money back. I can't do it. It's either that or I kill myself. Well, yesterday I had a huge breakthrough. And what I just started making notes about the book and what I thought the book was about. And then it knocked something around in my head and I was able to move forward. But I wasn't really, writing the next chapter and doing the da-da-da-da.
Yeah. Well, I think it has to do with just breaking, like, well, habituated, things get kind of frozen sometimes. I remember I went to the writer's workshop, Iowa Writers Workshop, and my last term there, I had the wonderful fiction writer, Margot Livesey, was the conducting the workshop that term that I was in. And at the beginning, she's Scottish. I'm going to do a Scottish accent. But at the beginning, she said, I would like to encourage you all, if you are used to writing quickly, to write slowly. And if you are used to writing slowly, to write quickly. And it never occurred to me because I'd take 3 years to write a short story. And I thought, oh boy, what am I going to do? I'll write quickly. I wrote 3 of the stories that ended up in Blues, my first short story collection. But anyway.
Yeah, I think you just find out the way, you have your routine, break your routine, try something different. I know Tom said with a short story, I had to write a short story for an anthology, which is always great when someone gives you a kind of theme, and I always like that, or I used to like it. I don't like it so much anymore, but I tried many things. I was in I don't know. So then I just tried a totally different voice, and I imagined this character. He got into my head, and I just was able to write it because it was something totally different that I'd never done. You can do that. Short stories are the best places to use as experimentation, of course. So I think we're out, right? We're finished.
Yeah,
Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.